Wanted Dead has come out with a lot of polarizing takes on it, and after going through the entire game on hard difficulty, I can honestly say, with all my years of experience covering video games, that Wanted Dead is in fact a video game. Wanted Dead tries to mix a lot of game mechanics and storytelling into one heck of a blender. We have a game that wants to tell an emotional story about living in a city where we can't tell who is human and who is not, being an emotional roller coaster with our friendly neighborhood police zombie unit, with some 80s major pop music to go with it, and then just dip into some anime and some hack and shoot for everything else. But there is certainly a lot to go over here, so let's start with the story, which stars Stone, convict turned police officer who runs the zombie unit. She kind of plays like she handles like the 80s action movie star, and that kind of describes the entire tone, I think, of this game. That feels like that, what was his name, Tommy Wiseau, The Room, but told in an 80s blockbuster. But each level has you running, gunning, and stabbing your way through hordes and hordes of minions, along with your three fellow officers, who all have some very unusual dialogue as the game goes on and through its cutscenes. Each member also brings with them a special ability or something that they can do during combat, and the one who's going to become your very best friend will be Doc, as he gives you a very, very needed extra life. Now, the gameplay itself is kind of a mix between gun and hack and slash. You'll be able to switch between your main ranged weapon and your sword with a simple push of a button. Enemies in this game come in two varieties, either range or melee. And typically, the game kind of wants you to fight range against range, melee against melee, but you are free to mix things up. There are four broad categories of enemies, from the normal range and melee ones to elite enemies in the form of cyborg ninjas and these kinds of heavy giant brutes with machine guns. Now, combat itself, while it may look kind of like a Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden, it is far more rigid in its approach. This is not a game where you're going to be learning a variety of combos. You have a few preset that mix between using your sword and your handgun, but you're not going to be unlocking brand new weapons, brand new combos, tech, things like that. You get one special ability in the form of this kind of adrenaline-fueled AoE shot that sets up enemies for finishers. And when the game is kind of firing on all cylinders, no pun intended, as you stun an entire room of enemies and then just effortlessly glide around finishing them all, it works pretty well there. But that doesn't last for all that long. We'll come back to that one in a few minutes. In between the missions of all the shooting and stabbing, the game is just loaded with all irrelevant kinds of situations. 1 minute you're discussing life, the next you are having karaoke to 99 Love Balloons. And the game kind of has that Yakuza charm of the different minigames. However, this charm definitely wears itself thin. And like I said at the start, while the individual elements are certainly working, when all put together in this respect, Wanted Dead doesn't quite make it there. And I am going to need a drink to go over all the issues with it. I'm going to give everyone a chance to get one of their own. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. If you're interested in my thoughts on design, then be sure to check out my game design books. For entry-level students, we have 20 Essential Games to Study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with more coming soon. So there is a lot to get to with Wanted Dead. I'm going to kind of start on the low side and work my way up. The combat system, as I said in the last part, it looks better on paper than what we actually got. You see, the first issue with it is that you're really not in a good position when it comes to fighting. This is not a game where you start out with some really great tools and you become even more of a badass. Instead, you start out very weak, not really able to chain a lot of enemy attacks together or kills, and it just feels very forced. And the skill tree that I've been showing throughout the last part of the video, that's not a passive or a sense of rewards. That is absolutely required to stand a chance, especially unlocking instant finishers and getting your teammates to actually do something. Now, with the combat itself, one of the major flaws with it has to do with how the animations are kind of controlled, or the combat is controlled by the animations. There are some bugs where I would do a finisher and the enemy would not respond. They would just stand there just like wondering, what is she doing? But this becomes even more of a penalty when you're trying to use the game's defensive systems. The main defense, besides being able to dodge, is to set up a parry. Hit the parry at the right time and you'll block an attack and set the enemy up for a counter move. But you see, here's part of the issue. The game does not allow you to soft or hard lock on to an opponent. So if you're fighting two opponents, let's say there's one on your left and one on your right, you're facing the guy on the left and the guy on the right goes in for an attack. In most action games, if you press block, the block would kind of catch that attack coming in. In this game, it doesn't. If stone isn't properly facing an enemy, or even at the right elevation of the attack, the parry will not trigger, and you will take all the damage of that hit. Not only that, but I have this issue where the enemy's damage from an attack was delivered before the animation. So the enemy would attack, I would stop them with a chainsaw. The animation would not play, but I would still get hit, or I would still take damage. And it's these little things that add up to more and more frustration as the game goes on. And trust me, the game goes on. And that takes me to kind of the nightmare that is level 5 of this game, because it encompasses almost every issue with this game. It is an awful, awful level. I could spend the next 20 minutes ranting about my experience with it. And it is just like I said, all the issues are magnified in this one level. It hurt me both physically and mentally to play it. So, a major problem that this game has is incredibly inconsistent checkpointing. You will have areas where you must fight 3 to 5 major areas of enemies, including normal and elite enemies, any one of which could kill you in a matter of hits, and there's no checkpoints. And then after that, you then have 2 simple fights, and then there's a checkpoint. It just feels like these levels were just stitched together, much like the story itself, that just kind of goes all over the place. And I'll talk a little bit more about the story near the end of this. But with level 5 and with the game in general, there's just way too many spots where you're just forced to fight a ludicrous number of enemies. And again, any one of them, especially if you're playing on hard or higher, can easily down you. And there are some times where you are separated from Doc, so you lose your extra life capacity. And that happens, of course, in level 5 as well. And enemies become more and more of a bullet and sword sponge. The idea I think the game is trying to convey is that they want you to just keep doing parry attacks and parry counters. But the parries don't really do that much damage against the mega elite enemies, the master ninjas and the kind of gargantuan guys. So you're just left to just stand there and parry for a few minutes. And again, if any one of those hits gets through, it can easily one-shot you. Besides the technical issues I mentioned before, there's also issues when it comes to enemy placement and how they attack. Sometimes when they're attacking, they can attack through objects, which kind of makes it hard to dodge or properly counter them. I died to very weird hitboxing from grenades on 2 separate occasions. One time, the enemy shot his grenade launcher through the wall of the car he was hiding behind, and it hit me and one-shot me. There's no way to actually dodge that. And then in another level, I died when my grenade launcher hit an invisible wall above the object I was kind of hiding behind, blew up in front of me, and killed me. And again, when you die, you get to go all the way back to the last checkpoint, which can be 15-20 minutes plus away. and they do several of those in level 5. And the problem with all this is that none of this is feeling like it's working together. I was hoping for some more like Metal Gear Revengeance kind of style of play, where you can effortlessly change between multiple enemies and sword and gun and all that crazy stuff. You can't even block bullets with your sword, which is just such a surprise. The game makes this very big emphasis on weapon modification and stuff like that, but one, you can't do anything about your sword, and two, when it comes to your guns, damage is king. And I would also suggest, for anyone who's having trouble with some of the spongier enemies, just invest in every damage modifier to your main gun, regardless of what it does to your other stats, and you can even get through some of the Master Ninjas fairly quickly in that respect. And trust me, you're going to be fighting a lot of them, and even more of them, and more of them in level 5. In fact, do a drinking, or we'll have a drink game every time I say level 5 in this part of the review. Now, returning to the story, it feels very much like someone just cut a lot of footage together without any real sense of whether this stuff connects or not. There are cases where it feels like cutscenes that should have made sense 40 minutes or an hour ago show up late. Information that doesn't make sense becomes this very big deal. The game likes to go into these like anime-inspired cutscenes, but doesn't really set up a payoff or anything like that. And the game just feels like it's trying to severely sequel bait us, which most likely we're not going to get. And not even ending with, she works hard for her money, the 80s pop sensation is going to get me to enjoy this game. But if you'd like me to sing my own cover of 99 Love Balloons or She Works Hard for the Money, that should give you a similar sense of what I felt going through level 5 of this game. So, with all that said, Wanted Dead, unfortunately, despite having some decent ideas on paper, just doesn't really work in concept. And this is certainly a good game to see about how important proper pacing, encounter design, and even just what you can do during combat can really raise or sink a game. So I would like to thank the publisher for giving me a press key for this one, even though unfortunately I didn't do all that much karaoke with it. If you'd like me to play your game in the future, please reach out, do the liking, subscribing, and bell ringing, and let me know what you think about this game in the comments below, and how much did you enjoy the suffering of playing level 5 of it. Be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where you examine the art and science of games, and never play level 5 of this game ever again.